Back on the record, the time is 11:03.
Unless there be any confusion, we're calling this deposition for the moment confidential, as we did with the others.
Understood. I think we have an agreement that for the initially, they're all confidential until we, in the course of time,
Okay, thank you.
make our designations, which I assume will be more limited. But Mr. Trump, you understand you're still under oath.
Yes.
I want to go back to your testimony earlier when I asked you a series of questions about could you stand outside the restaurant and with a sign saying don't eat here, could you say Mr. Zakarian's a racist or anti-Hispanic? Is it fair to say that as far as your understanding of your obligations as a landlord, apart from any other legal defamation or libel type obligations you might have toward anyone you might say something about, in terms of your obligations as a landlord, you can stand out there and say whatever you want about Mr. Zakarian or his restaurant, and he still has to keep paying rent?
Objection.
Well, I would say that if I gave him the premises and the premises was in good shape, and on the assumption I had to provide the electricity and the air conditioning to his premises, et cetera, and all of those things were done, yeah, now he would have to handle me differently. He'd have to go to court and get some kind of an injunction or court order to get me to, leave the area or take down the sign.
But as far as you're concerned, he has to keep still paying rent because you haven't violated the lease
Objection.
by
Yes,
doing that.
That's true.
This is the next one, 187. Mr. Trump, this is the later press release, or hotel news resource actually. Trump International Hotel to open this September. This is dated February 9, 2016.
Okay.
This article says, and it looks like this was put out by Trump, is that correct?
Could be, yes.
It says Trump International Hotel, Washington, D.C. will open in September 2016, 2 years ahead of schedule.
Right.
Is that correct?
Yes, it is.
And we talked a little bit about this earlier, but when you say schedule here, what is that a reference to?
I believe it's the reference to the agreement we have with General Services that we had to have it open by a certain time.
And
We're a couple of years ahead of schedule.
and that certain time you believe is sometime in 2018?
I think so. Well, I'd like to check it, but I think so.
Okay. $188. Mr. Trump, Exhibit 188 is an article from, I know it's not your favorite media outlet, the Washington
No,
Post.
I agree. Highly inaccurate.
Page 2 has a comment from you. You're welcome to read the whole thing, but I'm really only going to ask you about a quote that they attribute to you on the second page, about 3/4 of the way down, where it says that you shrugged off news that a second chef, Jeffrey Zakarian, planned to pull out of a deal to open a restaurant. Jose Andres was the first to announce he was backing out, and then it provides a quote from you saying they each left massive deposits, okay, which I like very much. They each are personally guaranteeing the rent, and they did that just to be cool and politically correct, Trump told reporters, adding, we're already dealing with other people, some of the great chefs of the world. Is that a quote from you?
Yes.
Okay. First of all, what did you mean by they were guaranteeing the rent to be cool and politically correct?
I didn't think I said that. I think I said they're guaranteeing the rent, period, is what I meant. They did this to be cool and good, not to guarantee the rent.
Okay.
They weren't being cool to guarantee the rent.
I confess I was very confused about that.
Yeah, I mean, it's one way of looking at it, I
It-
guess. No, they guaranteed the rent, period, and then they were doing their grandstanding. I mean, if they would have gotten out very quietly, I think it would have been a lot better for everybody. They caused me damages because, you know, they made such a big deal out of it, and they didn't have to make a big deal out of it. So that was disappointing. No, but that's what I meant. They wanted to be, they thought, politically correct by doing what they did. I think they made a mistake.
And why do you think they made a mistake?
Because I think they would have done well with the restaurant.
And you said that they have, it would have been better for everybody if they'd done it quietly. How so?
Well, we wouldn't have gotten bad publicity. I got a lot of bad publicity because of the way they handled it. They grandstanded.
And how has that harmed you?
Just a bad day of press, a bad few days of press. I think it, you know, I don't know how I can quantify it, but I think we were hurt by the way they did it.
Do you
They
think
did it very publicly. My son had a lot of respect for your client, and I think they even talked that day, and then all of a sudden, you know, he did a grandstand move, which got him a lot of publicity, and I'm sure he felt great about it, but it wasn't good for me.
At the time, in the time period between when you first announced your candidacy in June, middle of June 2016, which I think it was in June.
16.
June 16.
June 16.
June 16. So a year ago.
16,
today.
16, exactly today.
Exactly
This
today.
is the one they did a big story today in the New York
It's
Times.
your anniversary.
It's 1 year anniversary. It's a big
Yeah.
story in the Times today.
Oh, good.
Not a horrible story either. It's actually very nice. Actually, it's a pretty good story.
Yeah.
I'm not used to that. Okay.
Okay. So in the time period between when you announced on June 16, 2015, and when Mr. Andres and Mr. Zakarian's entities pulled out of their leases with the Trump organization, did anyone have any conversations with you about, along the lines of, look, if you retract these statements, look, if you can clarify, modify, make it clear that you didn't mean what people are saying you meant, maybe we can salvage these deals?
I don't think so. No, I don't think so. I mean, you'd have to ask my children, but I don't think so.
Did you have conversations with Ivanka in which she urged you to issue a clarifying statement?
No, not that I remember at all.
You have recently publicly stated that Judge Curiel in your Trump University case was biased against you
Counsel.
in that case, correct?
Yeah.
Objection.
Correct?
Yes.
And you mentioned specifically his Mexican heritage, correct?
Yes.
And is it your contention that he went so far as to violate his obligations of impartiality because he was biased against you?
I don't know.
Objection.
And then comments in the media seem to suggest that you felt that the fact that he was of Mexican heritage, you said, I'm building a wall, he's of Mexican heritage, seems to be a conflict of interest. Is that correct?
Well, I guess he doesn't feel it is. We'll see. I'll let you know about it. I think I've been treated very unfairly, but we'll see what happens.
What did you mean by that it's a conflict of interest?
Objection. Hold on a second. Counsel, can you draw the line for me on what this line of questioning has to do with this case?
Well, I think it's quite relevant
To
to
what?
the whole concept here in this case relates to how Hispanics and others are perceiving those comments, and I want to understand what Mr. Trump views.
But that's not your line of questioning.
Well,
You're not
I'm-
asking those questions about what he understands Hispanic. First of all, I don't think that's at all relevant. But you're asking him about his opinions, and you're trolling for something that, frankly, might eventually be leaked to the media. So I'd ask counsel. I know you have broad leeway here, but please be mindful
I am very mindful. I
and
think
bring
this
these
is-
questions into a relevancy zone.
I think this is relevant to this case. We have no intention. We haven't leaked anything to the media. We have no intention
You know
of
as well as
leaking
I do,
anything
this
to the media.
transcript eventually may well be public. Why don't you ask a couple more questions, and if I have concerns, we're going to take a break, and I'm going to consult with counsel.
Okay. Mr. Trump, I just want to understand why you think that your comments would cause a Latino or a person of Mexican heritage to potentially be biased against you,
With respect to what?
with respect to anything.
I think in many cases they like me because what I'm doing is for the people that are in the country legally, and I'm starting to see that in polls. If Hispanics are in the country legally, many of them are liking what I say, including people from Mexico and other places, that if they're in the country legally, they're liking it. And they're liking what I'm saying about bringing back jobs to the United States, because we need jobs. We don't have jobs.
A lot of your comments about this particular judge related to his association with a group.
Mm-hmm.
And what does that have to do with how people in that group or with that affinity might behave toward you or your entities?
Well, what I said is named La Raza, and there's another La Raza, and I've been told they do have a connection, and they said some very inflammatory things, and extremely inflammatory things
About what?
about Mexico, the United States, and various other things. And I think it was inappropriate. If it's true, I think it was inappropriate. And I've said it loud and clear.
And so, do you believe that many Latinos have misinterpreted your comments?
I don't know. I can't speak for other people. I can just say what my comments were. I'm fighting to keep jobs out of Mexico. I'm fighting to have Mexico not take our businesses away from us. Mm-hmm. Mexico is taking our businesses like we're children. Our leadership is not smart. We're losing millions of jobs to Mexico. Mm-hmm. We're losing billions of dollars to Mexico. And I'm fighting very hard for the United States. And that's what I'm referring to.
Do you think that Judge Curiel would patronize a Trump property?
I don't know. You'd have to ask him.
Have you done any analysis, you or anyone on your staff done any analysis to see if Latinos are less frequent patrons of Trump properties since your campaign announcement?
No.
Do you think that some Hispanic patrons would be less likely to patronize a restaurant in your hotel due to what you've described as misperception or mischaracterization of your comments?
Well, your clients is on the outside, first of all. I mean, it's really fronts on the outside of the building. I don't know. I think you'll get additional business, actually. I think you'll actually get additional business.
Why?
Because it's a hot hotel. And we're doing very well. Our bookings are very good. I mean, our booking's good, but I think it would have been much better. I think we would have been better had we had your client.
You think what would have been better?
I think it would have been great for the hotel, and I think it would have been great for your client.
Mm-hmm. When you say you think he would have gotten additional business, additional compared to what?
maybe compared to where he would have been without,
Without what?
as you say, my running for office. I think my running for office potentially would have helped him as opposed to hurt him.
And that's because people don't necessarily separate Mr. Trump, the politician, from Mr. Trump, the owner of the property, and they want to have a part of the excitement.
Well, let me just be clear. My properties are totally separate and distinct from me. I'm
Understood.
an individual. That's a company, it's a corporation, you know. So my properties
Understood that from a
are
corporate
totally separate. I think in many respects, beyond even corporate legal. It's totally separate from me as an individual, you know. It also represents Ivanka and Don and Eric, you know, I mean, but it's a totally separate situation.
Do you think that there are some Hispanic patrons who would be less likely to patronize any restaurant in any of your hotels or any of your properties?
It is always possible. I just don't know. I mean, I don't know how to answer that question. It's possible, but likewise, there could be some people that will come because of whatever it is, you know, because of a candidate.
And why do you think, for example, the Palm Beach property is doing particularly well? I think you said earlier it's
Because I think people like politics.
politics.
Yeah, and they like to be around the name and maybe me. I go there, you know. But I think people really dig it.
Would you agree that the demographics in Washington, D.C. are decidedly different from the demographics in Palm Beach?
Well, at the high end, they may be very, very similar. You know, you're talking about political, you're talking about a lot of wealth. So at the high end, I think they're probably similar.
Across the board, though, you would agree, wouldn't you?
Yes, I would say
quite
certainly
different.
across the board.
Okay. Do you believe that there are some number of liberal patrons, politically liberal people, media people, liberal people, who would make it a point not to patronize Trump properties in the wake of your campaign?
Well, like in your case, in your restaurant, if he did a great restaurant, I think for the most part, they want to go to the restaurant. They're not thinking about that. They want to go to a great restaurant.
But you don't have a crystal ball.
There
you
aren't
can't
that many
tell,
in Washington,
right?
believe me. There aren't that many in Washington, as you know.
That may be something we can agree on.
There aren't many. So this was a great opportunity, actually.
We're getting more better. We're getting better.
Good. Yeah, I would imagine.
Okay. When did you first hear that Mr. Zakarian's entity had terminated his lease with the Trump OPO?
I can't tell you when, but my son told me, Don.
And what did he tell you?
Essentially, I don't know if he used the word terminated. I don't know what the definition of the word would be, but he said that they're trying to get out of their lease.
Did you have a meeting with Ivanka about it?
It's possible, you know, maybe a meeting where something about this was discussed.
Mark this. Did you see all those I put down and didn't use?
I'm impressed, thank you.
Oh, thank you.
It's the psychology of
I
rewarding
was
a
hoping.
witness.
I was hoping when you did that. I was hoping.
And would you mark? This is the next one, please. This is, what are we up to? Yes. Oh, no, I'm sorry. It already has a sticker on it.
Okay.
This is previously marked as 162. We're saving time all over the place.
That's okay.
Okay, Exhibit 162, it was previously marked, is a Business Insider report titled "Donald Trump just released an epic statement raging against Mexican immigrants and disease." Would you agree that this is an example of
Oh, this one?
this one, 162.
Okay.
Wait, did
I
I
don't
give
have-
you the wrong one?
No, he's got it. He's
I
got it.
I have this one.
Yep.
Is that-
Okay.
Is that it?
Yeah.
Yeah, where is it?
It's the
Yeah.
lack of the glasses, I think.
Yep.
Yeah, where is it?
Oh, I'm
You're
sorry.
fine.
You know what?
Just let her
No,
ask the
I read the,
question. It's
it's Exhibit 162.
Yeah.
Okay.
Jeffrey Zakarian pulls out of Trump Hotel project.
Okay. Yes.
Okay. On the second page, this document says, we know Jeffrey Zakarian very well. This is the Trump team sent out a statement in response. The bottom of the second page. So, did you read and approve that statement before it was issued?
I probably did, but I don't remember, but I probably did.
Okay.
Probably saw it.
It says here, Zakarian is using the distortions by the media of Mr. Trump's comments. Do you see that?
Yeah.
And do you agree that your comments were distorted by the media?
Yes.
In a big way?
Yeah. I think the media is very dishonest. I say it all the time. I think they're among the most dishonest human beings I've ever met. No, but I say that all the time.
Right, but I mean, in this instance, you believe there was a big deal made of this by the media.
Yeah, I think it was distorted, yes.
And you describe it, or the Trump organization describes it as an opportunistic attempt to renege on clear and unequivocal obligations under his lease. Do you see that?
Yeah.
What about this was opportunistic? What was your understanding that he was trying to do to benefit himself?
He may have found out that the restaurant was going to be much more expensive to open than he thought because he started to get into it. He may have found out that maybe he just didn't think the business would be as good. I don't know. There are a lot of reasons you want to get out of leases. I've had people come to me 2 days after they sign a lease wanting to get out of it.
Do you think it's possible that he genuinely thought that your comments would make it more difficult for him to hire staff and attract patrons?
Objection. Go ahead.
Yes, I can see. Perhaps it is.
Okay.
But he has a lease. He signed. And I've been saying these things for years. I've been very consistent. I've been saying them from before he signed the lease.
You also note that he has a non-refundable deposit and has fully guaranteed the lease. Do you see that?
Yes.
Okay. Do you know whether that's true, that he had put up a non-refundable deposit?
I believe it's true, yes.
And at the end of the statement, it says this will have no effect on the completion and success of the project. Do you see that?
Yes.
Is that a true statement?
I'll tell you in about 5 years. I just don't know. I mean, I think it would have been very helpful to have the restaurant there.
And I know you say, I'll tell you in about 5 years. What do you mean by that?
Well, I have to see how the hotel does.
Because you don't have a crystal ball and you don't know how it's going to do.
I don't know. I don't know. I think it'll be good, but you never know.
You never know. When you met with Ivanka, your daughter, about Mr. Zakarian's entity decision to terminate the lease agreement, did you have any discussion with her regarding what to do with the space now that both restaurants had decided to terminate their lease arrangements with the Trump
Yes.
organization?
Yes.
Okay. And could you tell us, to the best of your recollection, what you discussed with her at that time?
Well, I would have rather gotten, I think I told her this, I would have rather have gotten another signed lease from another restaurant, because that's the ideal situation, but we didn't have any time. You know, we don't want to be in construction while the hotel is open. So we had to have everything done at the same time. So in the case of Zakarian Space, we are building essentially a very large conference room or meeting room. We wouldn't have had time to have a restaurant.
And you knew that at the time he terminated the lease?
Oh yeah, it was very tight. Even for him, it was very tight. But
So you said basically, we can't do this.
no, and we had to have the space finished. I didn't want to be building, 2 years into the project after everything opens and be building a space. I wanted to get it completed. So we decided on a ballroom, conference room, which we could start on right away.
And you made that decision virtually immediately?
No, but, sometime after I did.
And why particularly did you want to turn the space into a meeting room or suites?
I didn't. I would have much rather had Zakarian. I would have much rather had Zakarian. I think it would have been better for the hotel. But we didn't have an option. We lost our tenant. Our tenant, defaulted on his lease. And so now we have this space, and I wanted to get it completed.
Now, in the document we looked at a minute ago where you had the statement by the Trump Organization, it says, or actually it was an earlier one, you said we're already talking to some of the great chefs of the world. It wasn't in 162,
That's right.
I misspoke. So was that a true statement?
We were talking to the chef. We couldn't get him to make a deal. We couldn't get him to sign a lease.
And when you say you couldn't get him to sign a lease, it was important to your organization to have a lease and not a management deal?
I would rather have leases. That's why we have a management agreement with BLT, but I would rather have leases, yes.
And are you aware that there were a number of chefs, I think the record shows, that were interested in doing management deals for the northwest corner, the Zakarian
Yeah,
space?
but management deal is much different than a lease. A lease is much better to have
Why?
because it's certainty. You get your rent every month. The other one, you never know what's going to happen.
That's because what you get rises and falls based on the success of the restaurant?
That's correct.
And you don't know how the restaurant's going to do with any degree of certainty?
No, you never know.
Is that right?
With a lease, I know how a lease is going to do. It's going to pay me whatever the rent is.
But you can't say to any degree of certainty how a restaurant's going to do, so you don't want to do a management deal.
And what I'd rather do is I'd rather have a lease.
But is what I said correct?
Yeah. Well, if we're saying the same thing, it's correct. I'd rather have a lease.
Yeah. Because you can't ever say to any degree of certainty how a restaurant's going to do, and therefore you don't know how you're going to do under a management deal.
You don't know how anybody's going to do at anything. With a lease, you get your rent.
And has that been a philosophy that you've followed?
Generally, yes. Wherever possible.
It is possible under a management deal for that space that the restaurant could do, as you've said, you think Zakarian might have done really well in that space, correct?
Yes.
So it's possible that under a management deal, a restaurant would do really well, correct?
But it would never give us the kind of income that we were going to get from Zakarian in the term of rent, in rent.
How much less would you make? I mean, we'll strike that. If the restaurant under a management deal in that same space were highly successful, the hotel could make more money than under a lease. Isn't that right?
Yeah, I would almost say if it broke even, I'd be happy and service the hotel. In other words, if the restaurant under a management agreement broke even and serviced the hotel, I would say that would be considered somewhat successful.
Why?
Because we want to service the hotel. And it's not easy to make money with a restaurant, especially when you're not in the restaurant yourself. So he can manage his own restaurant. We're not. We're a big company that has a lot of different things. So it's not easy. So having a restaurant where the restaurant pays rent is a very valuable thing.
But you can't say how much you would or wouldn't have made under a management deal either, correct?
No, but I told you if I could have broken even with it, I would have been happy.
But you're doing a management deal with BLT, correct?
Yes, because we have to service the hotel. Not because we have to service the hotel.
But you don't know whether you may do very well on that management deal as well. You may make money, correct?
I may, but again, if I broke even, I'd be happy.
Okay. I'm going to turn to the letter of credit in this case.
Okay.
Show you what's already been marked as Exhibit 165. It's a compilation of documents related to the letter of credit that Mr. Zakarian's entity posted. You'll see the applicant is CZ National, the beneficiary Trumpold Post Office LLC. Did you have an understanding of what the letter of credit was supposed to cover?
No, I just know it was a letter of credit for maybe a deposit or something. I never saw the letter of credit. I just know I knew we had a guarantee and a letter of credit.
And did you understand that someone from your organization had to certify to the M&T Bank that the Trump organization had the legal right to draw down on the letter of credit?
Objection, Foundation.
I don't know that. I just don't know. You'd have to ask the lawyers about that.
I'd like you to turn, please, Mr. Trump, to the, looks like it's the 4th page in terms of pieces of paper in this document. It says it's a statement. There.
Keep going, Mr. Trump.
Okay.
It's the one with the signature.
It's the one that says statement
Yeah,
at the
there are
top.
2. There's a site draft and a statement.
Okay, got it.
Got it?
I have site
You
draft.
have
Which
site
one do you want?
draft.
Yours double signed.
Oh, okay. Got it.
You're okay.
Okay, I got them both.
Okay. You see that statement
Yes.
to the M&T Bank
Yes.
stating tenant is in default of the sublease beyond the applicable notice and cure period, and landlord is entitled to draw under the letter of credit pursuant to the terms, if any, of this sublease.
Correct.
Is that your signature?
Yes.
And is it your signature on the site draft on the prior page?
Yes.
Okay. Prior to signing this statement, or strike that, what was your understanding at the time in 2015, July of 2015, as to how this process worked for drawing down on a letter of credit?
I mean, I had no understanding. I know a letter of credit is a very powerful instrument, and I've never had a problem with a letter of credit before.
What do you mean? Never had a problem.
When you submit a letter of credit, when you tell a bank somebody's violated an agreement, they pay. You know, it's a very strong document. It's a very strong concept. And very, very seldom is a letter of credit challenged because they're almost unchallengeable. So I was surprised. I don't even know that they are challenging the letter of credit. I don't know enough about the lawsuit to know that. But letter of credit's a very powerful document.
And that's because if you tell the bank I'm entitled to get my money, the bank has to pay you your money.
That's true.
So is that effectively what you were doing here, saying I'm entitled to get my money?
Yes.
Objection.
What did you do prior to signing this statement to assure yourself that you were accurately making the representation to the bank that you were entitled to draw down those funds?
I asked my lawyers. This one right here.
And I do not want to ask you what
Okay.
Mr. Garten told you, but did you do anything else to factually assure yourself that you were making a factually correct representation to the bank?
No.
Did you go to the lease to look at what you're entitled to do with the letter of credit
I
proceeds?
assume my lawyer did.
Did you have, other than speaking to Mr. Garten, did you have any other communications with anybody about drawing down on the letter of credit?
Perhaps my children, but mostly my attorney.
Do you remember any conversations
No, I
with your
don't.
children?
No.
Did you, or anyone on your behalf, have any conversations with the bank about drawing down on the letter of
I
credit?
don't know. I didn't, but I don't know.
Do you know, as of the time that you signed this statement, Did you know what your damages were relative to the termination of the
No,
lease?
it wasn't something that I was doing.
Okay. And at the time you signed this certification, you understand, don't you, that the CZ National obligation to pay rent hadn't even begun to accrue yet?
I don't understand anything. I frankly was just given this by my attorneys. They said this is proper.
Yep.
Okay.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
Don't want to ask you what your
I
attorney
relied
told
on
you.
my attorneys, okay, to put it differently.
Okay. Good.
Now she's at me.
Okay. Were you privy to any discussions regarding a decision to file suit in this case?
Yes, I was.
And who were those discussions with?
I think it was mostly my children, Don, Ivanka, and Alan Garten.
And who made the decision to file suit?
Maybe as a group.
Yeah. At the time you made the decision, is it fair to say you didn't know the extent of your damages?
I would say yes, yeah.
I think I'm just about done. If we could take a 5-minute break,
Okay.
I'll consult with my colleagues who are a lot smarter than I am, and they'll be able to tell me what I've screwed up
Fine,
here.
okay.
And what questions I forgot to ask
You didn't screw up anything. Thank you
Going
very
off
much.
the record, the time is 11:40.
Oh, we.
Back on the record, the time is 11:53.
Okay, Mr. Trump, just briefly, did you personally have any conversations with any other chefs or restaurateurs regarding either of the restaurant spaces in the old post office?
Yes.
Who?
John George, long time ago.
When?
Long time. Maybe before Zakarian.
And what was the nature of that discussion?
See whether or not I could lease him the space.
And what did he say?
Couldn't do it, not as a lease.
He was interested in a management deal, but not a lease?
I didn't go to the management agreement. It was early on, so I didn't feel, I had more time.
But he basically wasn't interested in doing something in a lease.
Also, I don't think he wanted to pay the build out. One of the very good things you get from a lease is that, in this case, your client would have to spend all of the money to build out the space. And
Less the tenant improvement allowance.
well, other than whatever
You
may be in
agreed
there,
to
sure,
put in,
there
right.
might be some stuff that we get, but basically they would be building out their space. That's, that's millions of dollars that now I have to spend myself.
And do you know how much he had committed to spend on the build out?
No, but it would be millions of dollars.
You also testified earlier today that to the extent that you think the hotel is going to do very well and perhaps even get a bump up because of your campaign, you don't know how much of a bump it's going to get because of the campaign, correct?
No, I don't.
I think we can probably all agree you don't have a crystal ball, and
Right.
neither do I.
Right.
And you said you thought it would do better with a restaurant. Do you think it?
Yes,
And
I do.
I want to understand what you meant by that.
Well, I think the restaurant would bring people. A good restaurant like this one would bring people, so that would benefit the hotel in addition to the rent and the additional rent
bring people where?
to the hotel.
To stay in the hotel?
Yeah, sure.
Do you think that was the Zakarian name that would bring people to stay in the hotel?
It's got a good name.
But do you think that his name would have materially impacted the number of people who stayed at the hotel?
It's possible.
But you don't know?
Well, people would come to the hotel and they might stay there because there's a good restaurant.
But do you have any way of knowing whether that would have really happened?
I think it will happen. I can't tell you how much. People, a lot of times when they come to a hotel, they'll check the restaurant. If it's a good restaurant, they'll stay at a hotel as opposed to the one across the street or the one in a different part of town.
Have you ever done any analysis of the extent to which that actually
No,
happens?
I have not. But having a good restaurant in a hotel will increase your business sometimes dramatically.
But you've never done any analysis or looked at any analysis of how much?
No, but I'm sure there are companies that have done that in various other hotels, and they would be able to tell you. But having a good restaurant and having a name restaurant in a hotel can increase the business in that hotel very substantially.
Do you know whether there's any analysis of whether having a second restaurant in a hotel, when you've already got one, the incremental effect of the second?
No, that I don't know.
Okay.
But it wouldn't have hurt. I think it would have been good.
So, and when you say it wouldn't have hurt, having a second restaurant there with Zakarian in it wouldn't have hurt, and you think it would have been good?
I think having a good restaurant in a hotel is a very good thing for the hotel. It's one of the reasons we made the deal.
Okay. And therefore, if you could have a very good restaurant in the hotel under a management deal, that wouldn't change the effect that had on the hotel, correct?
If you could get somebody good, but it's a different kind of a thing. We have a restaurant coming in now. It's hopefully a good restaurant. You know, I hope they do a good job, but we couldn't get them signed to a lease.
Right. My point is simply, I understand what you're saying about having a restaurant there, potentially to some degree driving the revenue of the hotel, and driving the number of people who stays there. You know, you can't quantify how much, but you have a sense that it is a favorable thing that attracts people to come and stay there, correct?
Go ahead.
Do you know whether it causes them to pay more to stay there, in your experience?
I really don't know, but look, it's common sense. Having a good restaurant's a positive thing.
Okay. So can we agree that having a restaurant being a positive thing to potential patrons of the hotel and the restaurant, from the patron standpoint and from the hotel business standpoint, in terms of room occupancy, it doesn't matter whether it's a restaurant management deal or a lease?
It depends. Generally, and I think there are studies of this, when somebody essentially owns it, through a lease, if you call it a form of ownership, you'll find the restaurants are better managed.
But in terms of...
Do you understand what I mean?
I understand what you're saying, but...
When they're responsible to pay rent, when they're responsible for all of those things, including payroll, et cetera, when you have a lease, they are responsible for that bottom line. And it's not this big, massive company that will have too many employees and maybe the service won't be as good. A lot of different things. When you're responsible, when you have a lease to pay, in the case of Zakarian, you know what the number is. Oftentimes you'll find that that's a better run restaurant. It's like ownership. It's a better run restaurant than if you have a management agreement.
They've got skin in the game.
Yeah.
Okay. So I don't think I asked my question very well. In terms of the population out there who are restaurant goers,
right.
As I understood your testimony earlier, the restaurant is a bigger draw, and potentially you get, if you have a celebrity chef or if you have a really good restaurant, potentially more people are going to come and stay in the hotel.
It could be, yes.
It could be. You don't know, but it could be.
Could be.
So if you have a celebrity chef in the hotel and you think that's going to be a big draw, in terms of the draw factor for getting people into the hotel, does it matter whether it's a management deal or a lease?
Objection, ask and answer.
Well, the problem is we couldn't get anybody. And we didn't have enough time to get anybody because we were let down by Zakarian. We were really let down. He had his lease. He was all set. He was going to spend all this money on building this place. All of a sudden, he says he's going to violate his lease. So, we didn't have enough time because we're, in the meantime, getting ready to open a hotel. We're going to be opening very shortly, as you know, in a few months. And almost less than that. And we didn't have time to do that. Had we had more time, we would have been maybe in a position where we could have gotten somebody. But in the meantime, we weren't. And a very big factor is the fact that Zakarian was going to spend millions of dollars building out a space.
Okay.
And now we're going to have to spend millions of dollars to build out whatever space it is.
Here, I'm just trying to focus on the element of your testimony where you said a celebrity chef or a really successful restaurant, a good restaurant, can be a draw for patrons to the hotel.
Yeah, but restaurants are better when there's a lease than when there's a management agreement.
But my point is simply, if you have a management deal with a celebrity chef versus a lease with a celebrity chef, if the celebrity chef is drawing patrons in because of their celebrity, does it matter to the patrons whether it's a management deal or a lease?
No, but you'll find that the quality is better when there's a lease.
Okay.
That's been historically proven.
You testified earlier today, Mr. Trump, that with respect to why it's good to have a lease, that you're going to get your rent. That's
Right.
what you're going to get. And you understand that there were at least a couple of different components of rent, and
Sure.
I put quotes around
Yes.
rent under this lease. There's base rent and percentage rent.
Correct.
When you say you're going to get your rent, you're talking about the base rent, right? Not the percentage rent?
Yeah, but I
Because
think he would have done very well. I think he would have made a lot of percentage rent. I think he was going to do very well with this restaurant. People were talking about it. I think he would have paid a lot of percentage rent.
But when you were talking about earlier what you're going to get, you were talking about the base rent. I'm just trying to figure out what you were talking about.
Well,
back
I get the
then.
minimum of the base
Right,
rent.
right.
But
Okay.
then, in addition, I think he would have done very well. I think we would have gotten good percentage.
Right. No, I understand that sitting here today
Right.
you think that.
I
But
do
when,
think.
But when you're talking about the benefits of a lease and what you're, no matter what you do, no matter what you go out there and say, you're going to get your rent. When you made that testimony, you're talking about base rent because you don't know whether you're going to get percentage rent.
Look, I will say this. We know we're going to get the one. I think he's going to do very well, but you can certainly never tell what's going to happen.
Right. Okay. Anything else? I don't have any further
Thank you.
questions.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for coming.
Done?
You're done.
Okay.
You're done.
Thank you. Nice to meet you. Thank you.
If there are no further
Lunch.
questions, this marks
Tell
the end of
Clark
the
I think that's
deposition
fantastic.
off the record at 12:03.